award-winning writer Shabnam Minwalla on what it takes to get characters from two different eras to speak to the reader convincingly, as she does in her new book, Zen. Shabnam is a Mumbai-holic, an ardent sari shopper, a murder mystery buff, and an occasionally frazzled mother of 3 teenagers. She has spent all of her life with words, working as a journalist with the Times of India, writing columns and features in various publications and non-fiction books about facets of Mumbai. What she most enjoys, though, is writing books for children and young adults. Her popular books include The 6 Spellmakers of Dorabji Street, What Maya Saw, Saira Zariwala is Afraid, and the rib-tickling Nimmi series. She has won numerous awards and teaches creative writing in a Mumbai college. Her latest book, Zen, a mix of romance, history, and politics, has been greeted by fantastic reviews. Can we have a round for Shabnam?
So, a big hello, and it's always such fun and so lovely to be back at Neve, my 4th time, and I feel very fortunate to be on the list every time. Today I'm here to talk about my new book, which is called Zen. It's a big fat book, and a book that drove me mad because I truly adore murder mysteries and books with lots of horror elements and dead bodies, and they cheer me up immensely. But Zen is a real change of pace. It's a romance, and I found that very difficult to do. But I'd like to tell you all the story behind Zen, tell you how the book was born, and then we'll jump into the topic at hand. So I think about 3 or 4 years ago, I suddenly woke up one morning and found I'd been added on a chat called Love Letters. And you know, when you're a mummy and 50 plus and you're added on a chat called Love Letters, you kind of perk up. I perked up. And initially, it turned out the chat had been started by a cousin's husband. And there was an interesting story to this. My cousin's grandmother was my Nani's sister. And this grandmother had died, I don't know, about 10 years ago. She was a very energetic and sharp-tongued and altogether lady named Masi Zulekha. Now, Masi Zulekha was long departed. Just before she died, and I didn't know this, she had handed a little packet to my cousin. And my cousin was going through her own whatever. She was busy, things were going on. So she didn't really look at the papers. Years later, she was cleaning a cupboard, as we all do, suddenly in a fit of, I must get things in order. And she found the packet. So for the first time, she began to read what was in that packet. And to her astonishment, it turned out that they were pages from a diary that her grandmother had kept when she was about 19 years old in 1935. That was interesting enough. I think what was even more interesting was the tone, which was extremely modern and contemporary and very, very, very definite. Now, when I think of a Muslim woman living about 100 years ago, or I think of any grandmother or great-grandmother, there is a picture in my mind. It's based on stereotypes and biases, I admit, but I had imagined that my grandmother and her sisters had lived very narrow and sort of cloistered lives. The diary indicated otherwise. So the first page of the diary, could we have the next slide? Oh. So I just press a... Okay. So that's the first page of the diary, a little difficult to read, but it begins on the day she gets engaged. So she actually tore out only a few pages and gave them to my cousin, but the first page we have with us was the day she got engaged. And basically she says, today I got engaged, I'm happy and I'm unhappy. God bless that boy. How did he know I like emeralds and chocolates? And then, very quickly, the tone turns a little dark. And she says, I'm not really sure I can love someone whose arms I have been thrust into. And then we started going through the other pages, and it turned out that somewhere in her life there was another boy. It seems to be a Hindu boy living in the building. She never names him, or she calls him something in Gujarati, which could be Gablo or Gabbar or whatever. It's a very unromantic thing to call someone, but Gablo, Gabbar it was. And anyway, and then through the diary, there are little glimpses of this person. She says things like, I was sitting at the window and looking down, and he walked past, and his rhythmic walk is glorious. It sounds a bit strange, but whatever. And then she says, he has not forgotten me. He looks up at me, and we look at each other. You know, those kind of interactions are all over her diary. And look, so I knew this old lady. I knew her till she was 90. And I kept thinking, this is Masi Zulekha. This is Masi Zulekha in the most shocked way. Then the boy she's engaged to, his sister comes with a photo because she's never seen the boy. So she writes, I wanted to cry. He is not a patch on my gablo. And you feel very sorry for the man she's going to get married to. But I think for me, encountering this diary it was such an eye-opener. Because I think all my preconceived notions about the world of 1935 and the world of my grandparents were sort of shattered with those 20 tiny pages. And this is just another, so many random entries about a fairly, mundane life, going to the masjid, which she complains about. Sick of going to the mosque every day. Sick of fasting every day. When will this Ramzan end? And random stuff. Tailor came today, messed up my blouses badly. So a lot of very routine stuff. Oh, it seems to, don't worry. But another really interesting thing in the package was the fact that the boy had written her 3 love poems. And one of the poems I actually used in my book in toto, but I had to edit it slightly because the boy was pretty graphic. And I felt our young people cannot be exposed to such lingo. But the sweetest part of it was this. So when her shadi was coming, she must have invited him, right? She must have given him her invitation card. And he returns the card with the words on it, to she who is zalim. And then inside he has taken the invitation card, turned it around, and over there he has written another poem, basically saying, you are cruel, what have you done to my heart? And in a way for me, the saddest part was the last page. Because the diary ends with, today I am getting married, I am learning to live a life without love. And it's a lot of rubbish, because she lived a very full and happy life, but the feeling of heartbreak she must have felt when she was sitting there and writing those words, I mean, it still cuts me when I think of it. So the diary came, and sometime later I was talking to Shayoni from Duckbill about the diary, and she told me, do something with it. But I was very cowardly, and I thought, I can't set a book in 1935. How will I recreate a time about which I know nothing? I mean, do any of you know, did they have fridges then? I'll tell you. Did they have phones then? I honestly didn't know anything. So I just parked it, and I thought Masi Zulekha and her story, whatever, it's there. And every time I met my cousin, she would say, do something with this. The reason my granny gave it to me was she wanted the world to know something. Time moved on, and suddenly we came to 2019, and the anti-CAA protests were taking part across the country. And my daughters were very involved. And I happened to be talking to Shayoni again about the protests and about how my daughters felt. And she said, write a book, do something. And by some strange alchemy, the fact that she said the same words for the 2 things banged in my head. And I thought, I will write a book. And I will write a book about these 2 girls. And slowly it occurred to me that maybe they could be related. So great-grandmother and the great-granddaughter, both called Zainab. The contemporary one is called Zen, and the older one is called Zainab. And so I decided, okay, so this is sort of what I am going to, one sec, I just wanted, this is the poem that the boy wrote that I've put in my book. And now, for me, the trick was really to recreate 2 worlds. So physically, I kept both worlds in the same space in an area of Mumbai, Bombay called Kolaba. But I wanted to create 1935, and I wanted to create the world of 2019. And that for me was super fun and very scary. So how do you time travel to 1935 when you don't know anything about it? So I used to be a journalist. So I did what any good journalist would do and do loads and loads of research. So I went into the archives and I found that there was a newspaper then called the Bombay Chronicle, which was publishing daily through that spell. So I sat and read every single newspaper of 1935 and about 3 months of 1936 to get a sense of the world. And it was really interesting. So one of the big questions in my head was, did they have a fridge? I don't know why that was so important for me, but it was. And suddenly somewhere I was turning one page of a paper online and I saw an ad by BST, Bombay Electrical Supply Transport Company, saying there is a new gadget for all housewives who struggle with keeping food fresh, and it is called the electric refrigerator and available for rent, 14 rupees 25 paisa a month. So immediately I knew Zainab's family has to be talking about renting a fridge. Then phone. Yes, there were phones then, thank God. How much freedom would a girl like this have? The diary offered some glimpses, but beyond that, I really didn't know. Now, fortunately, because I had earlier done a book on local history, I was on a bunch of chats with a lot of historians and historians are very, very generous with information. This is what I have found. So they quickly sent me all kinds of information, their grannies' photographs, their, family pictures. And it was incredible because in the span of 2 weeks, I suddenly had this whole gallery of people in my head. So one of them was a Catholic. He sent me a picture of his grandmother in 1932 or something. She was wearing like a midi skirt. So immediately I knew what Zainab's neighbors would be like. And that is how I peopled the book. The other thing I did was create the physical area. There is this thing called the Times of India directory, which is amazing. So this was the time when very few people had phones, but everybody had addresses. So this directory just tracked every building, who lived in each building and what they did. So employee of the Bombay Electrical Company or employee of the railway or dentist or whatever. And every single shop. So I had this amazing map of the city in my head and I actually moved my characters through actual shops and actual restaurants and actual roads. And I knew that whole area of Colaba at that point was an empty cotton green, just with warehouses and, a cotton green which was no longer functioning as a cotton green. It had just moved. That element for me was this, this place, a kind of spooky, rat-infested place, which I knew would play some part in the book. At that point, I didn't know what. So that was sort of the way I created the space. I mean, then there are all the obvious differences that one creates to create scenes. I mean, clothes. What Zen wore today, and the modern girl, is a very buttoned up and quiet girl. And she lives in grey t-shirts and battered boots and pants. And Zainab, of course, was a Bori girl, 1935. She wore odna ghagras. While she doesn't protest about the clothes she's wearing, she's quite sullen about the fact that she's expected to fit certain norms. And the other thing I found is that the Bombay of the 1930s was a very cosmopolitan, very international city. It was the kind of place that random Russian adventurers, ladies of questionable repute from England, from East Europe landed up. If they were in trouble in their own country, Bombay was a nice place to be. And Colaba Causeway was this zone of gamblers and people with all kinds of criminal records and princes who'd lost their principalities, that kind of people. So that vibe I tried to get into the old book. And of course, it was very easy for me to write about contemporary Zen because that is the world I live in. The same space, but very busy, filled with hawkers, filled with like a real Mumbai, Bombay, noisy, happy place. And so that was a place. Clothes, of course. Food also, the Zen of today eats what we all eat. Bhel puri, pav bhaji, She's nervous to try kombucha, but she's attempting to. She's passionate about Nutella, sea salt cookies. Whereas Zainab's world is, of course, much more traditional. She's eating all the old Bori dishes, kuddal palido and malida. But it's Ramzan, right? So all those, the fasts are broken with huge, elaborate feasts, which I had a lot of fun conjuring up. I think for me, what was really interesting was imagining the family dynamics. So Zainab's family is very patriarchal. The father is a huge and terrifying figure, and everybody listens to everything he says. And of course, Zainab's family is big because families in those days were big. And because even though the diary indicated that her life was much freer, I wanted a big family so that there would be interaction of some kind. And I thought I'd read maybe the first page of the diary so you get a sense of the Zainab in my head, her imaginary family. So this is how Zainab's diary begins. Today I turned 16. Mum gives me a pearl bangle with a ruby clasp. Papa gives me a talk about how I must no longer behave wayward. Bhai Faizullah gives me a book about Bombay. Ben Fatima gives me an embroidered handkerchief and a box of Afghan snow. Her way of reminding me that I am not the beauty of the family. Bhai Kadar forgets my birthday like he does every year. He rummages in his drawer and finds this diary with a seahorse on the cover. Turns out to be the most useful gift of all, a good place to jot down my observations, recipes, and thoughts that cannot be shared with my most unsympathetic family. Wear my new lemon odna ghagra with the white lace. Mum says yellow is a dainty color. Thing is, I am not a dainty person. Too angular, too brown, too talkative, and too opinionated. Too surly. Too much the opposite of docile. Jiddi Jainab. That is what Mota Mammar calls me when we visit her in Surat. She doesn't say it with affection. Bobi Asma telephones me for my birthday. Most thrilled because have never had a phone call just for me before. Ben Fatima puckers her mouth as if she has swallowed a spoonful of Waterbury's compound. My sister is 2 years older than me. She's 3 shades fairer than me. Nobody would dream of giving her a pot of skin whitening snow for her birthday. Still, the light here is really scary. She is the epitome of modest girlhood. Nobody would think of calling her Jiddi Fatima. She is a great favorite with Mum and Papa, have grown up with the words ringing in my ear, learn from Fatima. Faultless Fatima is engaged to a man who is handsome and rich and an acknowledged catch in the Bora community. From a family that Mum describes rather crudely as 24-carat gold. Even so, my sister's mouth puckers if I get a pearl bangle and a telephone call. So that gives you a sense of Zainab's family. Zain's family is a very different cup of tea. Though she is the great-granddaughter, she is from a mixed marriage. Her dad is Bora, her mom is Gujarati Hindu. And they hold on very hard to being, liberal, being left-wing. They're very, very worried about the CA protests. It's really a very central conversation in their lives. And and Zen herself is not somebody who wants to engage with anybody or anything. She's a musician. She wants to wear her headphones and retreat. But the whole business of CA kind of pulls her out of this shell to an extent. And the book begins with her, she and her best friend Menka, who's a major firebrand and, the kind of girl who will post Mahatma Gandhi quotes and fight with everybody on the school bus and be marching on Marine Drive every 5 days. And so she pulls Zen into making a poster for a school debate. And topic of the debate is, are we killing our constitution? And Zen is posting a is sort of trying to paint a tombstone. The tombstone is coming out very badly. So to sort of pep it up a bit, Zen sort of put a big red RIP on it and asks the question, because she's a Doors fan, is this the end? And the tombstone causes a huge ruckus in the school because it is taken to read, is this the end of India as a country? And there are elements in the school that immediately see this as dangerous, a sign of terrorism, a sign of all kinds of subversive activities. Anyway, at the center of the book is really, it's a romance. There are 2 romances, maybe 3 romances. But, Zen is not the kind of girl who would leap into romance with anybody. She's a very closed person, right? But her mom is dragging her to this family event. And I don't know, kids in the audience, when your moms drag you to the event, sort of somebody's Sangeet or somebody's Mehndi for a wedding, how do you all react? Are you all excited or are you all gloomy? Any reactions? Are you excited about going for the shadi or are you grumpy? No, not excited, no? Even I was never excited. I'd always be thinking, but why? I don't know what these people look like. It's not fair. And what did your moms say? You have to go, it's family. People are coming from Chicago, people are coming from Timbuktu. How can you not drive from Colaba? And so there I would be with my sullen expression and my one shalwar kameez that was worn 25 times in 3 years. And so Zen is pretty much like that. Now she lands up at the shadi, and her sister Abha is a very gregarious kind. So immediately all the cousins descend on her. It's the Sangeet, and all the cousins come running and say, hey, we are putting up an act. Are you going to dance with us? And Abha says, yes, of course. And then the cousins say, will Zen dance with us? And Zen runs. And then her mom is going to a whole group of cousins, and Zen doesn't want to go there because she knows that all the uncles and aunts will ask her that most dreaded question. Who can guess what that most dreaded question is? When are you getting married? Not yet. She's a bit young for that. But do you recognize me? And then what is the right answer to do you recognize me? Yes. And what if they ask you, who am I? And that happened to me every year. So I fully sympathize with Zen that she ran away. So quickly she runs in another direction and she sees a big bhel puri counter and is very happy. She thinks, chalo, there is one advantage of being at a shadi where I know no one. I can stuff my mouth with pani puri and sev puri, and nobody will come at an inopportune moment when and say hi, and then have to swallow my bhel puri. So she's standing at her counter looking very cheerful with life in general when, shall I read out a little bit? And so near the counter, there are these bunch of uncles in shirts, fruit-colored shirts, and they're all talking loudly about Indian Muslims and, saying the kind of things I think we overhear more and more. So if you're not happy here, go now, go to Pakistan. Why are they here? And Zen is feeling very agitated. It's bothering her, but she's not Menka. She's not brave enough to be Menka. So all she does is glare at the uncles a little. Then they look at her, so she backs away. And she goes to the bhel puri counter. And there are some ladies in front of her, and they're ordering the bhel. And there's also a boy wearing a rust-colored kurta. She's watching the boy with some degree of interest, but not over much. As the women walked away with their plates, the boy in the rust kurta said, bhel puri, not very spicy, actually don't put any chili at all. The request, uttered in an American accent, was drowned by the opening blast of Kala Chashma. The aproned man behind the counter looked confused and asked, Kya? Bhel puri, with almost no chili, the boy repeated very slowly. Again the man shook his head. Zen watched the interchange with interest. Rust Kurta was 19 or 20 years old. He had the glossy brown skin and dazzling white teeth of Indians who've grown up eating Dunkin' Donuts and strawberries the size of shuttlecocks in places with names like Poughkeepsie and Sacramento. He had the imperious features and chiseled lips of a statue, one of the senator murdering Roman emperor types. Chili nahi, he said very slowly. Perhaps the apron man was thrown by the American accent. Perhaps he was irked by the patronizing, I am dealing with a dimwit tone. Sorry. Rust kurta was broad and a few inches taller than Zen. The kurta which... Sorry. Yeah. The kurta, which featured golden paisley pattern, was both too tight and too long and gave him the unfortunate silhouette of a Maharaja's bolster. Zen noticed that the boy's politeness was peeling at the edges and his wide white American smile was wilting. With exaggerated impatience, he repeated, "No chili." The apron man behind the counter began to toss ingredients into a steel bowl. Onion, save, puffed rice, tamarind chutney, and then 2 hefty dollops of fiery green chutney. A moment later, he scooped the mixture onto a plate, sprinkled save, and held it aloft. "No chili, I hope," Rust Kurta repeated as he took the plate. But the white apron server had turned away to make the deli chart for one of the fruit uncles. Zen abhorred strangers who struck up conversations at bus stops and grocery stores. She was allergic to relatives who landed up at Beryl House with unwelcome advice about the virtues of a vegan lifestyle, about the scientific benefits of praying namaz 5 times a day, about why she needed to play a sport or learn another language or do Surya Namaskar or have a teaspoon of cold-pressed coconut oil every day. MYOB, she always hissed in her head, so it was only natural that she in turn should mind her own business. Zen wondered briefly if she should warn Rust Kurta about the perils that lurked on his plate. But her answer arrived loud and clear. Mind your own business. Zen had already made her decision by the time Rust Kurta plunged his spoon into the mound of Bhelpuri and lifted it to his mouth. So she was as startled as he was by the yelp that escaped from her lips. "Stop!" she cried, loud enough to be heard over Kala Chashma, loud enough for the fruit impersonating uncles to stop masticating and for Mr. Mango Milkshake to choke and splutter. Rust Kurta jumped so violently that a sizable quantity of bhel flew off his plate. He looked around wildly, expecting an anaconda or an axe-wielding killer at the very least. Instead, he saw a bunch of tutting uncles. He stared balefully at Zen. "What?" he snapped as he dusted save and onion off his brocade kurta. "Why did you shout?" A sprinkle of save had settled on Zen's skirt as well. Flapping it briskly, Zen tried to explain. "I just wanted to warn you that there's a load of chili in your bhelpuri," she said. While she says this, a sort of a giggle escapes from her, which enrages Rust Kurta even further. And he gets really pretty offensive with her. And he said, "I don't understand. You were standing here watching me say no chili about 200 times while you sang to yourself, and now you shout, and now all these uncles probably think." And Zen, who's normally a very quiet person and never says anything without making 20 lists of pros and cons, said, "They probably think you pinched me or something." And no wonder the poor fellow is upset. But bad start to any romance. But of course, things do proceed from there. And maybe I'd like to read to you about the other romance. Zainab's romance. That is very daunting. So, so when I was writing about the two time periods, I think what really interested me was the difference in the way of communication. So for Zen and Yash, it's a bit of a forbidden romance in a way because Yash comes from a very conservative background. He's just come from Chicago to represent his family, which is in some kind of turmoil. He's not happy to be in Mumbai. He's staying at the yacht club. He's in a bad mood. He's bitching and moaning all the time. And now he meets this girl who behaves really rude and odd. But Zen's parents are, of course, extremely liberal, mixed, are terrified of anybody who shares Yash's sympathy or comes from Yash's background. The mum is especially nervous because she knows Yash's family, the Desais, and she keeps saying they're very hard people. I don't want much to do with them. Nobody approves. But still, it is so easy for them to talk to each other. And it's so easy for their relationship to progress because of the thing we all bitch and moan about so much, the phone. And the whole fact of WhatsApp messages, which, you know, once they start getting interested in each other, they have no sense of whether the other person is interested or not. But with a discrete WhatsApp message or two, and just, you know, there's so many subtexts to the whole language of phone messaging these days, how quickly the other person responds, the emojis they sprinkle, the capital letters, the small letters, the punctuation, that I think it's much easier for them to figure out their feelings for each other fairly quickly. And though, in theory, they should be hating each other, and they do at various bits, this becomes an easy way to communicate. And I felt very sorry for any romance that would play itself out in 1935. Because Zainab lives right across from the boy she falls in love with. But meeting him is so traumatic for her. But maybe I'll read out the bit of how they meet the very first time, just so you get a sense of the two couples. So Zainab is quite sad that her life is so small. Her family has moved from Singapore and she feels life has become extremely constricted. And then the entry of December 5th, 1935 starts with, everything has changed. It happened in the most unexpected manner. We are on our way to Bobby Khattam's house for Rozu Chorvanu, that is breaking fast in Bori Gujarati. As usual, I'm the last one to leave. Was too caught up in the mysterious rider and forgot to dress up. Then decided to wear new white sari with the silver border, the one that makes me feel romantic, just like Devika Rani. Organza keeps slipping, find it very difficult, angry with myself for choosing to wear sari. Most unnecessary. Run helter-skelter down the stairs to catch up with the others. Pick up speed past the dark part of the staircase. Always afraid of something lurking in the lightless cavity, and run with great speed. I'm out of breath when I step out of the building and barrel headlong into a man. Okay, I'll just finish 2 minutes and The man holds my elbow. Perhaps to stop me from falling, perhaps to steady himself. The hand is warm, strong, gentle. Immediately, she knows the hand is strong and gentle. Look up and find that it belongs to a stranger, a singularly beautiful stranger. Mumble an apology. Step back with a confused smile. Need to hurry to catch up with the others, but my feet will not oblige. My heart feels so big that I have trouble breathing. Good girls don't turn to stare at strange men. I'm not a good girl. Cannot help looking over my shoulder. The stranger has stopped too. He too turns to stare. His expression mirrors mine. I'm so glad I decided to wear white sari after all. All the way to Jhansi Castle and back, my heart beats a rhythm. Where are you? Where are you? Who are you? Who are you? And as their romance progresses, this very clever girl decides that she's very interested in the newspaper. He's a paying guest in the house across. So she asks her neighbor, may I come every day and read the papers? I'm so involved in current affairs. And that is how she gets to meet the guy every day. But much tougher than WhatsApp, right? Anyway, questions, any comments, anything at all that anybody wants to say? Thank you. Thank you. Any questions? Small, big, strange? No? Oh, yes? Yeah, mic's coming here.
So your thread is two different times, right? And you must be using some sort of device to do that.
Yeah.
And but oftentimes it would be some letters and those kind of things, right?
Yeah.
But is there any other ideas that came to your mind how to do it?
So it's many things, okay? So the diary Zen and her sister Abha find when they are cleaning a cupboard, which is always such a good way to add, like, masala into a book. So clean the cupboard, they find the diary. They find more than just the diary. They find a bunch of things. And, so it took me about 2.5 years to write this book. And through the 2.5 years, I knew that the past had to, in some ways, influence the present. And I didn't want that final revelation to be something as tacky as a necklace or jewelry or some, that kind of thing seemed too obvious and dated. I think finally I ended with some kind of life lesson that the two girls learn when they learn about Zainab and her wider family after they find the diary. And I think it helps Zen a lot in navigating her relationship with Yash. So it's in a way passed on wisdom. For me, it was interesting because the past influences the present. There's no getting away from that. But for me, I wanted to write the book in such a way that even when I was writing the Zainab bit, I wanted the reader consciously to be aware of, Zainab's diary entry is very tiny and we know it's going to end with her marriage. There is no other way that story can end. It ends with her marriage. So it is a happy/unhappy ending, depending on how you look at it. But I wanted the sense of, even when you're reading Zainab, you know about Zen and where Zainab's family has gone. So in some odd way, the future also casting its little shadow on the present. So it was a lot of fun to write and it drove me mad. Thank you so much.